This is someone speaking for the President of the United States.
We know, everybody knows what we're talking about. You eat steak and you follow up with a baked potato, you load it up and...
Well, this attorney has been saying for months now, no collusion, staying on message, trying to protect the president and insisting that the president had nothing to do with it.
Well, not only that, I mean, you can go through from the very beginning. Donald Trump saying we had no contact with any Russians during the campaign. Mike Pence saying in January of 2017, we never had any contact with any Russians. We only spoke to the American people. You can go through one cabinet official after another cabinet official, one member of the administration after another administration official lying, saying they had not had contact with Russians, some of them lying in front of Congress. It's why Jeff Sessions had to recuse himself. And so then we've had this fight for 2 years about collusion. There was no collusion, absolutely no collusion, why we didn't even meet with Russians. And then, of course, we find out about the meeting. And this huge ball of yarn continues to unwind. We all think we know where it's going to end up. But here's a big step forward. Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, admitting last night on CNN that, yes, members of the Trump campaign committed collusion.
The amount of false reporting about this case is despicable.
Mr. Mayor, false reporting is saying that nobody in the campaign had any contacts with Russia. False reporting is saying that there has been no suggestion of any kind of collusion between the campaign and any Russians. Because now you have Paul Manafort giving poll data that winds up leading to this coincidence.
Well, you just misstated my position. I never said there was no collusion between the campaign or between people in the campaign.
Yes, you
have no idea if I have not. I said the President of the United States. There is not a single bit of evidence the President of the United States committed the only crime you could commit here, conspired with the Russians to hack the DNC.
First of all, crime is not the bar of accountability for a president. It's about what you knew, what was right and what was wrong, and what did you deceive about. Those are going to be major considerations.
The president did not.
He said nobody had any contact. Tons of people had contact. Nobody colluded. The guy running his campaign
he didn't say
was
nobody.
Working on an issue at the same time as the convention.
He said he didn't. He didn't say nobody. How would you know that nobody in your campaign...
He actually did say that, Rudy. He said nobody, and then he said, as far as I know.
He said it in a... Well, as far as he knows, that's true.
Okay, a couple of things. I'm going to go to Peter Baker, but I think that there are a lot of veiled sort of little jokes here about the possibility of Rudy Giuliani often being intoxicated when he's talking. I think the bigger concern, this is just analysis, is that he's trying to normalize something that they can't actually pull away from far enough. So they go from no collusion to collusion. What's wrong with collusion? Peter Baker, you're covering the 5 times the president has met with Vladimir Putin and the issues of collusion or whether or not there was it. You're looking at why each of those meetings looks suspicious. What are you finding?
Well, I think that's exactly right. And this is one of the reasons why this question continues to hover over this president is because of his own conduct and behavior. When he meets with Vladimir Putin, he does it in ways that other presidents haven't. He does it only with interpreters, no aides or note takers. He takes the notes away from the interpreter when he walks out and says, don't brief other members of our administration. He talks with Putin on occasions when he says he's not going to talk with Putin. He sits down with him at a dinner where the only person present is the Russian translator, not even an American interpreter. None of these things may add up to all that much. He is an unconventional politician, to say the least. It may just be the way he does business, but it raises eyebrows among anybody who's done these kinds of diplomatic ventures in the past. And given that he knew that there are questions about his campaign and his own relationship with Putin and the Russians, it seems unusually risky to do things that would give reason for people to raise questions further.
You know, Peggy, I just got to ask you your thoughts about waking up last week, reading news reports that the FBI was investigating the President of the United States about possibly being a Russian asset, reading stories like Peter Baker's that talk about a commander-in-chief who refuses to have any American officials with him and only interpreters, and then he tears up the notes, then he swears them to secrecy, has one bizarre meeting with, you look at Helsinki after another with Putin. It's not like this guy didn't have a history during the campaign that didn't cause us all grave concerns.
You know, when I first heard some indications that there were, in some circumstances, no note takers at the meetings between the president and Mr. Putin, it really disturbed me in many ways, one of which is you take careful notes of such conversations between the leaders of two big nations at what is always a fraught time. You do this for a number of reasons. One is everybody has to review exactly what was said and exactly where we are, everybody around you who works for you. Another, just as serious one, is that history needs to know what was said. These notes exist for a long time. Eventually, they become issued. It was only because of the careful notes of the conversations that we knew that the conversation between JFK and Khrushchev at Geneva really didn't go well, and that it was a really dangerous moment between the U.S. and the then Soviet Union. So I take this stuff seriously, and I think the big question that we've been talking about for some time is very simply, what is the relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin? I hope we find out soon. I don't know what this is. As for Rudy, I think he was kind of signaling that the Mueller investigation is going to have some difficult moments for the administration.
I think that's an important point, Peter, because a lot of people are suggesting maybe that Rudy Giuliani, again, is freelancing, that he went on TV and he's sort of speaking for himself off the top of his head, which may be the case in many of his answers. But as Jonathan Lemire and I were talking about earlier, many times these are the first markers laid down by the White House. Rudy Giuliani goes on TV and then something follows. It becomes their theory of the case. So do you think last night when he said, I never said there was no collusion with the campaign, it was just that the president personally didn't collude, is he laying out an argument because they suspect something is coming down the road, perhaps out of the Mueller investigation, that implicates other people in the campaign, which, by the way, it already has, not specifically with collusion?
No, that's exactly the point, exactly. Whether he intended to or whether this was just because it's in his head and he sees something coming and he's beginning to lay out a new rationale, in effect, you see, I think, a pretty important shift. Because when the President of the United States says no collusion, he's not saying I didn't collude. He says this is a hoax. And when he says it's a hoax, he means it's a hoax as a whole thing. He's not saying there might be a collusion by people underneath me, and I'd like to get to the bottom of it, right? If he genuinely thought people working for him had done something wrong with the Russians, the natural thing, the normal thing for a president would be to say, well, let's get to the bottom of it. I don't want that to happen either. We haven't heard that from this president. He has said no collusion across the board. So what Rudy Giuliani said last night is a definite, significant change.
You know, Peter, the discussion that we're having right now about collusion, about the lack of note takers in meetings in Helsinki, all of this could be classified, well classified, Joe, I would think, under the weight of this presidency and what it is doing to this country. It's altering the way this country operates, both overseas and within the borders of this country. And the note-taking, the lack of note-taking, is particularly relevant this morning in the wake of the attack yesterday in Syria, where we lost 2 Americans and several others wounded. We don't know their conditions. But there were no notes in any of these meetings. So the foreign policy by impulse is articulated by the President of the United States. We're getting out of Syria. All troops are being withdrawn within 30 days. We don't know if Putin raised this as an issue with President Trump in any of these meetings. We don't know so much about what's going on. Those notes, as Peggy alluded to, in fact, under a normal presidency, those notes would be shared with the National Security Council. Those notes would be shared out in Langley. Those notes would be shared with the Russia desk in the State Department. But there are no notes, and there is no common sense, coherent foreign policy in this presidency.
Well, no notes, and there's no common sense foreign policy in this presidency, and it goes again to the relationship